Okay, so the tools I'm going to use is this wire brush. This is just a regular flat file. This is my X-Acto knife. I've also got this sanding block. I've used it forever. I probably should replace it, but it's so far so good. You can always clean these up with the wire brush. I've done that many times. You know, a little bit of water and a wire brush, either wire or a nylon brush. We'll just clean these right up, and they seem to last a long time because all we're doing is sheetrock. Because these were, you know, just a piece of PVC plate. You know, this is just a normal 3 mil, or I think it might be a 4 mil piece of PVC. I've taken pink and blue board, you know, the insulation board that I've used in other projects. I shaped it up to be a little bit of a hill, glued it on with, you know, a glue, and then I've taken PVA glue and sheetrock and smeared over the whole thing, and then we're going to do another layer of PVA with sand in this video, so it ends up like this. What that's for is because the durability of this is going to be really high once we prime it. We prime it, we put a top coat on it, you know, paint it, and then we put a matte varnish. This is going to last for a very, very long time. And because we've made the bottom out of plastic, if it gets a little damp or wet, it's not the end of the world. More than likely, this is going to survive even something where it got damp or wet, you know, on a table or in storage. So the reason why we use the spackle is it does give a hard coat to the foam. And when you go to prime, if you've put the spackle and then the PVA glue layer, and then you do another PVA layer with sand, you're not going to get spray primer. If you use spray primer, you're not going to eat this foam up, because the spray primers will deteriorate foam. It eats it. The chemicals in it are caustic, and they'll eat through foam and make little pits and holes and things like that. If you use the sheetrock, heavy-duty sheetrock with PVA, you get this tough exterior, and the foam is not exposed, and you can, you know, spray prime right on top of it. Now, I don't use spray primer every time I do projects like this. Sometimes I use latex house paint. If you can find latex house paint that is the right color and you just want to brush it on or airbrush it on, or, you know, any way you want to apply it, a lot of times house paint and quart or pint things you can find for super, super cheap at the hardware store. Somebody mixed it up. They said, oops, that's the wrong color. And you can take advantage of that and prime with that instead of spray primer. I am going to spray prime all 4 of these pieces just because I'm trying to move fast with them to do this project for the studio. But just be aware, you can use brush on primer if that's what you would prefer. But I wouldn't do that until you've added the sand and PVA glue and let it dry thoroughly, and then go back on with your brush primer. And when I say thoroughly, that's like 20 to 30 minutes in the sun on a nice sunny day that's warm, or maybe overnight if you're just drying it in an interior space like a basement or a studio or garage, because you do want it to be nice and dry, that PVA layer and the sheetrock layer to be super dry before you paint on a wet, you know, a water-based primer on top of it, because it'll make it deteriorate. Anyway, let's get into this and start shaping it up. I'm just going to start with my file to kind of take off any of the sharp edges. This makes a little bit of a mess, but it's not awful. And I like to just smooth things up as best I can with this. And then I'll move on to the sanding block before it's over. Now, I mentioned that you could use a knife. If you're going to use a knife, I would just use the flat of the blade, not the blade itself. The blade could cut into the foam or the PVA, you know, into the surface and gouge it, which you're not really wanting to do. You're just really wanting to smooth it up the best you can. And I like to get it off of these edges with my flat blade of the file, just because I don't really want it on this edge, the sheetrock or the PVA. You can see I tried to clean up the edges so there's not sand right on it or sheetrock right on it. So I will take the time to just kind of clean these up. the best I can. And you're just trying to smooth down any of these, you know, big lines like this. You can see where that line is. You just want to smooth that out the best you can. And it's okay if you expose a little bit of the foam because, like I said, you're going to go back over with one more layer of PVA with sand. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but you are trying to protect that pink foam from the primer the best you can. And like I said, overall, it adds durability to the piece over a long period of time. All right, that's looking pretty good. Now the other tool I mentioned was the wire brush. I'm gonna do that on the other piece so you can kind of see that it does a very similar job to this. So see this one, this is, you know, medium smooth. I'm gonna hit it with the sanding block before we're done. But I went from something like this to that pretty fast. Now with a wire brush, it's kind of the same. I just think it takes longer, but it does do more of an even job of smoothing up places like that. You know, you're gonna get rid of hard edges pretty fast with a wire brush. I just don't prefer it as much as I do this. This with the flat edge seems to go faster and give me the result I'm looking for. But you can use a variety of tools. You could even use, you know, popsicle stick with that flat edge. It's just gonna take longer sometimes if it's wood compared to metal. Anyway, I'm just gonna shape this up and then we'll hit it with the, like I said, the sanding block, and then we'll move on to the PVA glue with sand over the top. All right, onto the sanding block. You'll see how fast this goes. Once I get to this spot, I can smooth this up. And you're just looking for it to be as smooth as possible. It doesn't have to be perfect, but what this does is it just makes it look more realistic. Once you sand it, you're like, oh wow, that really looks good. I'm always amazed with the result I get out of it. All right, that looks pretty good. One little spot there. Once again, I'm going to show you this one is not done with the sanding block. That one is. I think that looks a lot better. It's really smoothed up. Looks more realistic. All right. So now I'm going to grab a cheap hobby brush. This is just a round brush, and I'm going to clean this up a little bit just so some of the dust gets off. Now you can see on this one I exposed a little bit more of the pink than I would like normally, but like I said, I am going to cover this back up with PVA glue in a second, so it won't be detrimental to the piece. Clean this one up. if you are allergic to dust, or you know, this kind of sheetrock dust makes you cough or whatever, do use this in a well-ventilated space. Sometimes I wear a mask when I'm doing a lot. These two pieces, it's not so bad. And of course, I just, I'm gonna sweep all this up with a brush and then use a vacuum, you know, to get it completely clean in the studio. Okay, so next little bit, I'm going to use this PVA glue, which is just a wood glue that I have watered down just a little bit, and of course my lid is completely stuck on. Hi, caramba. That's why all studios need a toolbox around, because of this kind of stuff. Wow, it's really packed up with glue. Here, I'll use the end of my file. Yuck. You can see that old glob of glue. All right. Disaster averted. All right, so anyway, back to where we were. Is I'm going to use this PVA glue, which is a wood glue, and then I have this sand, which is a play sand with a little bit of gravelly stuff in it. I'm going to use it instead of my regular mix. I'll show you the difference. This is my regular mix where I've mixed play sand, flint chips, and then walnut chips, and then sprue pieces. This I reserve for like bigger pieces of terrain, or especially 40K. I think it looks good if you want a little bit of rough in there with your regular sand. But because these are graveyards, I'm just going to use this play sand, and it has a little bit of like walnut and stuff in it, but not a lot. It's mostly just play sand. That's what we'll be using today. So got a sheet of paper here, which is going to save us a lot of time and effort. I have this, and I have my hobby brush. So this is just a cheap hobby brush that's round. I use it for terrain pieces like this. I'm just going to squirt this glue over it. The only bad thing about getting it on the paper is, of course, the sand is going to stick to where the glue is, no matter what you do. So catching the drips is a good idea, but you're going to get some on there anyway. And you just want a good thin coating everywhere. Doesn't have to be very thick in order to protect it. All right, I'm going to try to clean up some of this with a paper towel, so my stickage on the paper is not high. All right, now, I'm gonna do one more thing here. Is, you see I've got a little bit around this edge. I'm just gonna take my paper towel and try to clean up that edge just a little bit, so that we're less likely to have a bunch of glue stuck to the edging. I've created another issue. Don't want a line if I can help it. All right, there we go. Now, I'll put this back down, and I'm just going to shake out the sand over the top. Let that sit for a second. And then, now you can see I have a spot right there. That's why I use this type of nozzle, So I can put it right where I need it to be, go back into a spot, put the sand back in that spot, let it sit for a second, and then that spot is fixed. I'm just gonna clean up this edge with my finger. This knocks off any excess sand that I don't want on the edge. All right, there we go. This needs to dry, like I said, for about 20 minutes in the sun or maybe overnight here in the studio. And then it'll be ready for spray paint. I am gonna glue a couple of things on there, which I'll get to in just a minute. All right, this is why we're using paper, just so we can just funnel that back into our container. And then we'll do this one. I mentioned my brush out in my cup of water, but because I use glue, I'm gonna have to use, soap and water for sure to get that really clean in a minute. All right. Once again, I'm gonna clean up these edges. Glue. Dry off any glue on my piece of paper the best I can. Right. Then I'm gonna put the sand on. For any spots that were missed, it looks pretty good. Right, set that to the side, using my super duper funnel. All right. Now, because I got just a little bit of glue on my file, I'm just going to clean it up with the wire brush a little bit, because there's nothing worse than having a piece of glue stuck to it with a piece of sand, and then you go back to use it as a file later and you're like, wow, that didn't work. But that's why I keep a wire brush, is I can clean up files really quickly. And if I filed a lot with it, sometimes I'll just use the wire brush to clean it up after I've done a lot of filing. Wire brush can really help you keep these things unclogged. You can also wash this with soap and water to get off any, glue that's down in the file. But I can feel it. It feels very texturized right now. which is what you're really just looking for, is to feel that texture. All right. Yeah. All right, and then we'll put these tools away. You know what, I'm really gonna clean up this tip since the last time we had such a problem. Okay, put all my tools away and go wash this brush. Oh, right. We also were going to glue on some pieces onto these two pieces. So let me do that right quick. I think this bigger one's going to go on the bigger hill. I'm just going to use super glue for this piece. Once I get it into position, I'm going to use the super glue to kind of go around the edge. Same thing over here. A little super glue on the bottom. A little super glue around the edge. Boy, that one does not want to stay. Nope. All right, and then a little bit of super glue here. Just going to put one little headstone looking piece down on the lower edge. All right, that should be good. Now, if you want this to look really great, we're going to do a little bit of sand treatment right around it. Doesn't have to be anything crazy. But anywhere that super glue is, we're putting a little bit of sand in. It's going to give it texture, so it doesn't just look like dried glue later. While it's wet, it's a good idea to go ahead and get it in. Shake off the excess without dislodging my tombstones. And set those to the side. All right, and then I was just going to pitch this, but I'm going to actually just put it right back into my container. That is it for your ASMR moment. All right, now, get this a little white down. I am going to do just one bonus thing here. If you were really doing this for Old World and it was humans, you could definitely do something like this. clean up this edge. I'm just using just a regular wide, popsicle stick. Now, one thing is of course I've cut this end a little bit of a diagonal shape. I'm gonna just kind of straighten that up a little bit. Now, in a pinch, you could totally use this piece as a tombstone. It's wood instead of, PVC, but you could easily just stick that down, on a piece like this, and it would look like a tombstone, without too much trouble. But what I was getting at with this cut piece is if I cut this little thinner one in half, I could easily make crosses and put them somewhere on the piece also. Like if it was a human and you wanted to use the cross symbolism, you could, but I like the tombstones. It could go for anything at that point. Or the grave markers like this piece. That could be, it could be lizardmen for all that matter. But anyway, there we are. That's the 4 pieces. You can kind of see together. I'm gonna prime these as soon as these 2 dry, and then we'll move on to the next step. Thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe. We really appreciate you watching these videos, and I hope you learned something so that you can build awesome epic terrain for your tabletop games, and so you can build a tombstone setting or a graveyard setting for your next old world adventure. Anyway, talk to you soon. Thanks for watching.